Like many New York Rangers, Vincent Trocheck is coming off of a disappointing season. We tell you what he must do to recover.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1375 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, gonna go ahead and continue today with our fun-filled off-season series where we discuss the best and worst case scenarios for every single player that we project to make the Rangers opening night roster. We've covered a couple of the big superstar players thus far, and we work our way to another one here, and that will be Vincent Trocheck. Trocheck, like I just mentioned a second ago, one of many New York Rangers that need to do more for this team this upcoming season than they did this previous season. One of many players that fell off sharply last year, and obviously we hope that things are on the upturn at this point for Vincent Trocheck and so many other players on the New York Rangers. But like we always do, we're going to start with the bad stuff. We're going to begin with the worst case scenarios for Vincent Trocheck. We'll work our way to the best case scenarios. Always good to end on the good stuff. And then we'll have kind of like a final verdict, some final thoughts on Vincent Trocheck and what to expect from him this upcoming season. So again, we begin with worst case scenarios. I think in a worst case scenario for Trocheck, he has another season where he kind of leaves a lot of us wondering if he's beginning to decline a little bit. Now, Vincent Trocheck is only 31 years old. It's not like he's in the absolute twilight of his career, but it's interesting watching Vincent Trocheck, his overall career progression when it comes to offensive production, because it's really all over the place. There's no, like, if you look at his career numbers, as far as like goals, assists, points, and whatnot, there's no real rhyme or reason to anything. He can be very up and down from one season to the next. But one thing that I have noticed is that it does seem like, and this goes back to his time with the Panthers, the Canes, and I think it also includes his time with the Rangers. When he has a bad season, or not necessarily a bad season, but a little bit of a down season in terms of offensive production, he tends to kind of kick it up to another notch the following season. And we hope that that's obviously going to be the case this upcoming season. But it seems like he doesn't tend to have two down seasons in a row. If that was to happen here, though, with the New York Rangers, then I think all of us would start to get a little bit worried. There could be some concern about, whether he is on kind of like the back nine of his career. Again, I think it's a little bit early for that kind of talk, but I wouldn't completely throw out the possibility either. I think certainly a bounce back is in store and is quite likely for Vincent Trocheck this upcoming season, but you can't help but notice if he has two down seasons in a row, the trend, and then you look at the contract, and he's only in year 4 of a 7-year contract. And, I think overall that contract is a bargain, and we'll have more about that in a little bit. But you will start looking, kind of noticing the fact that, geez, we still got 3 more years of Vincent Trocheck, on this team. That's in a worst case scenario. That's if he has another down season. And I'm not so sure that's going to happen. I think Trocheck will bounce back, quite nicely this upcoming season. But also in a worst case scenario, I think there could be a situation where we begin to notice a little bit of wear and tear with Vincent Trocheck. If you look at average time on the ice for the New York Rangers the last handful of seasons, the Rangers have leaned on Vincent Trocheck quite heavily. Now, I'm sure he has no issues with that whatsoever. He probably sees it as a compliment, if he's even aware of these numbers. But, as fans, we do tend to notice these things. And Trocheck has been one of the true workhorses for the New York Rangers. And again, that's a compliment to him more than anything else. But if you look at this past season, Trocheck led all forwards on the New York Rangers with 21 minutes, 5 seconds of ice time. The next closest forward in terms of average time on the ice per night to Vincent Trocheck was Artemi Panarin, and he was at 1940. So again, Trocheck 2105, Panarin 1940. Now, at first glance, that doesn't seem like a massive difference, but you stretch that out over the course of 82 games. I mean, that time really adds up. And it's pretty obvious that Vincent Trocheck is somebody that the Raiders count on in all situations of the game. And he's the guy that just about night in and night out is going to lead the Rangers in time on the ice, at least in terms of the forwards. And to take that a step further, if you look at each of the last 2 seasons, Trocheck has the 3rd highest time on the ice, period, for any player in both of the last 2 seasons. The only 2 Rangers that had more time on the ice than Trocheck in each of the last 2 seasons were Adam Fox and Keandre Miller. So Trocheck has been third in each of the last 2 seasons. First among forwards, third overall among players. And again, it doesn't sound like this massive, unbelievable difference as far as, Trocheck's time on the ice versus other players' time on the ice, but he is being asked to do a lot out there. Could that start to catch up with Vincent Trocheck at a certain point as he, gets into his early 30s here? Especially when you consider the fact that he does like to mix it up and he's not one of the biggest guys in the league. Could this, could his durability take a little bit of a hit? It's at least possible. I wouldn't throw out that possibility. But by that same token, I think while we're talking about durability, we also have to acknowledge that Trocheck has basically been the definition of durability, certainly with the Rangers and really throughout most of his career as well. Trocheck has played all 82 games in all 3 seasons that he spent with the Rangers. And even the season before that, what turned out to be his last season with the Canes, 81 games there out of a possible 82. So Trocheck has certainly been durable. I do worry about him kind of like wearing down a little bit toward the end of seasons, though, with, how much ice time and how much they're asking him to do night in and night out. But there is a new coach with the Rangers. We'll see how he looks to deploy Vincent Trocheck and everybody else in terms of, time on the ice and everything like that. So that is one, slight cause for concern, I suppose. I would say also in a worst case scenario, Trocheck simply does not have the edge that he needs to really be great, to really be at his absolute best. Among many, many things that were wrong with the Rangers this past season, and this goes for Trocheck, it goes for pretty much the entire roster, just an overall drop-off in fight, in energy, in difficulty to play against. We saw that top to bottom across the entire roster, but I think with Trocheck, it stands out more than anybody else because I feel like watching him, in other places before he got to the Rangers, but certainly with the Rangers night in and night out, that he thrives on being that guy. He thrives on being that guy that's going to get under your skin, that's going to be pesky, that's going to be a pain in the butt, that's always running his mouth. He's always got something to say. They interviewed a couple of different Rangers when the Rangers initially signed Vincent Trocheck in free agency, and Ryan Lindgren was one of them. And I remember he said something like, yeah, in the playoffs last year, I don't think that guy shut up once the entire series. So that's kind of funny, but it also kind of gives you an idea of Trocheck. That's just how he's wired, man. He has to be that dude that's out there and getting in the middle of everything. And even if he's not necessarily stuffing the score sheet every night, which he can do that too. I mean, certainly he's a good offensive player, but even if he's not doing that, he'll still find a way to affect the game. He'll still find a way to drive the opponents crazy. I think Trocheck, maybe as much or more as any player on this New York Ranger team, needs to be that guy. He's at his best when he's that guy, when he's driving the opponents crazy. So we didn't see as much of that from Trocheck this past season. Now, I mean, the vibes across the entire team, again, I'm not putting everything on Trocheck or any one individual player. The vibes across the entire team last season were just not what they needed to be. They were not good. You guys know, you watched this team just like I did, night in and night out. There were flurries every now and then where it looked like the Rangers were kind of getting back to their old selves, but it always quickly fizzled out. And I just feel like the Rangers in general need more of that feistiness, that just that energy. And Vincent Trocheck needs that as well. Vincent Trocheck is just kind of going out there and going through the motions until the game ends. He's probably not going to have a very good season. And I think we saw a little bit of that this past season. But certainly he's capable of being that guy, being that pest. And once again, the term I keep using, getting under the skin of his opponents. The game within the game. That's where Vincent Trocheck, I think, really thrives. But in just a second, we're going to get to the best case scenarios, the things that can go right for Vincent Trocheck this upcoming season, for him to have a bounce-back season and for the Rangers to have a bounce-back season as a whole. And we'll get to all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is upon us, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for every kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is the best because it lets you bet on pretty much anything you could possibly want. There's player props, there's building a same-game parlay. You can even jump in live as the action is unfolding. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. And it is quick and easy and the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, let's go keep everything rolling here. On Locked On New York Rangers, a big shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting this podcast throughout the entire season, the entire off season, the ones that are here every day. It really does mean a lot. As far as what we're going to be doing for the rest of this week, if you're hearing this, it means that we are only a handful of days away from the Rangers and Flyers rookie series. Basically, it's just what it sounds like. Some of you are familiar with this, I'm sure, and we've talked about it on this podcast in previous seasons, but we're going to have the Ranger rookies playing the Flyer rookies, a pair of games on Friday the 12th and Saturday the 13th. That's always a lot of fun to get a good look at these young players that are coming along with the Rangers. A couple of guys on the Rangers really helped their cause last year. Adam Edstrom had a strong showing in that rookie series. So too did Victor Mancini. And lo and behold, they both made the opening night roster for the Rangers this past season. Now, of course, Mancini was part of the JT Miller trade, but that's beside the point, and you get the idea. Guys can obviously help their stock and increase their chances of making the team with a strong performance there. So definitely looking forward to talking about those games. But for right now, let's keep the focus on Vincent Trocheck, and let's shift our attention to the best case scenarios. I think in a best case scenario, Vincent Trocheck really steps up as a leader for this team this upcoming season and does his best, does everything he possibly can to lead the Rangers basically out of the darkness. Now, when we've done these best and worst case scenarios, and this is probably like the 6th or 7th one that we've done so far this offseason, talking about various different Ranger players on previous episodes, but a theme that's come up quite a bit, because we've talked about, the supposed superstar players, and in many cases, the veterans of this team, the theme that keeps coming up is that this team needs more leadership. And I don't think there are too many people that watched this Ranger team play hockey last season that would fight me on that. That's one of the biggest issues that they had last season. It's one of the biggest question marks going into this season. And it really was a continuous problem last season. That's why it's a theme that continues to come up, as we do these episodes. The Rangers last season, they were basically just like a rudderless, directionless ship that was just lost at sea. And there needs to be a little bit more direction. Somebody sooner or later needs to take the wheel. Can Vincent Trocheck be that guy, or at least be one of those guys? I think in a best case scenario, that's exactly how it unfolds. Trocheck, we've mostly seen him in recent seasons. I say recent seasons, the 3 seasons that he spent with the Rangers. It does look like he's somebody that has stepped up at least somewhat as a leader of this team. But like I said, last season, whether we're talking Trocheck, Mika, Kreider, Fox, Panarin, I don't know where the leadership was coming from this past season. There just didn't seem to be a whole lot of it. But in a best case scenario, the Rangers fill that void. And in an extremely best case scenario, Vincent Trocheck is one of the main guys that fills that void, which leads me into my next point that I want to talk about as far as best case scenarios for Vincent Trocheck. In a best case scenario, certainly for Trocheck himself, he ends up being named the next captain of the New York Rangers. Now, there's an ongoing debate here among myself, all of you, Ranger fans everywhere. Are the Rangers going to name a captain for this upcoming season? Should the Rangers name a captain for this upcoming season? If they do, who will they pick? If they do, who should they pick? That's not always the same player, right? As far as who they end up picking and who they should pick, who the best choice would be. But I think in a best case scenario for Trocheck, he ends up being the captain. And I think he's somebody that would wholeheartedly embrace that role. I don't know him personally. That's just kind of the impression that I get watching him go about his business with the Rangers the last 3 seasons, watching him in, post-game interviews and whatnot. There tends to be a little bit more accountability from Trocheck, I think, in post-game interviews than we see from, certain other players on the New York Rangers. Now, I'm still on Team Miller. I lean slightly toward JT Miller over Vincent Trocheck. And I think if the Rangers do name a captain this upcoming season, certainly it will either be one of those two or Adam Fox. To me, those are the only 3 players that are really in the running to be the Ranger captain if they name one for this upcoming season. And we'll see how it all shakes out. I lean toward JT Miller just because I think he's the one that you brought in to really kind of shake things up, to change the style of play, to change the energy in the room, and to play with a little bit more bleep you. I think JT Miller brings that in spades. Miller is a little bit of a wild card, though. We have seen him, where his temper, volatility, whatever you want to call it, has gotten the better of him in the past. We know the whole messy situation with Pettersson, with Vancouver. So Miller would be the bolder choice. I'm all for being bold for a team that has 1 Stanley Cup in 85 years. But if you want to play things a little bit safer, or you just think Trocheck is the right guy for the job, then maybe he ends up being the next Ranger captain. But in best case scenario, Trocheck is named the captain because he's somebody that, like I said, I think would wholeheartedly embrace that role and would wear the C with a lot of pride. I still lean toward Miller, but some of you might feel differently, and you might want to roll with Vincent Trocheck for this upcoming season. I think also in a best case scenario, Trocheck is part of a special teams revitalization, top to bottom across the board. Now, as far as the power play goes, there's no guarantee that Trocheck is going to be on the top unit. We actually discussed this a couple of episodes back when we did our best and worst case scenarios for Alexis Lafreniere. Or no, that was our position battles episode. And we talked about who might be the 5th man on the Rangers top power play unit, because I think the Ranger top power play, you're looking at JT Miller, you're looking at Panarin, Fox, and probably Mika. Can't say for sure on Mika, but he'll probably be there, which basically leaves you with one spot for either Lafreniere or Trocheck. I lean a little bit toward Lafreniere, but Trocheck, I mean, certainly he's going to be in the running. And even if Trocheck is the odd man out on the top power play to start the season, that doesn't mean he can't eventually work his way back there. And the Ranger power play sucked last season. I mean, let's just call it like it is. It was the 5th worst power play in the league. And somehow the eye test was even worse than the numbers would bear out. Watching this Ranger team on the power play down the home stretch of this past season was nothing short of painful. They had a better chance of just declining the penalty and playing 5v5, or maybe you can't decline the penalty, so maybe just play 4-on-4. Put 4 skaters on the ice and play them 4-on-4. Honestly, it felt like they had a better chance of scoring if that was the case, rather than being on the power play. It was just lost. There was no direction. They had a better chance of giving up a shorthanded goal than they did of actually scoring a power play goal. But Trocheck is going to have a hand, you would think, if the Rangers are to turn around the power play at some point this upcoming season. And perhaps even more importantly, Trocheck also needs to be a big, big part of the Ranger penalty kill. We all know the Rangers lost Chris Kreider. We discussed that quite a bit on here, and I can understand there being some feelings where, certain fans are mad at the Rangers for doing that. I think, for me, I've talked about in the past, to me, it just kind of felt like a necessary evil of the business of hockey. It was something that just had to happen this offseason without getting into too much detail on it. But it does kind of leave a void in a couple of different areas, one of which, of course, is the penalty kill. Now, Trocheck obviously is a great penalty killer in his own right, but the fact that you are down one of your top PKers from last season, it just makes it that much more important that everybody else steps up. And Vincent Trocheck is going to have a huge, huge role on the penalty kill. Now, if you look at the, NHL stats by team last season, 1 for 32, I mentioned that the Rangers are 5th to last in power play success rate. The penalty kill doesn't look so bad. I mean, it's number 11. That's not terrible. It's better than average, right? But when you look at how this PK looked down the stretch this past season, it was abysmal. The Rangers were bleeding scoring chances left and right. And as a fan watching this, I just no longer had the feeling when the Rangers were shorthanded that they were going to kill off the power play. That's just the way that it felt. I mean, it kind of just became like a gut feeling or whatever it was. But for the first time in a very long time, anytime the Rangers took a penalty, I had this feeling of dread in my stomach. Maybe some of you guys did as well. Whereas in years past, I mean, look, it's not ideal to be shorthanded. It's not ideal to have somebody in the penalty box, especially, if we're talking about the playoffs, which we didn't have to worry about that this past season. But it's obviously not ideal, but at the same time, I felt like, they're going to get it done. First of all, you got Igor in net. And secondly, you've got some really good penalty killers on this team, and they're going to take care of business, and they're going to get the job done. And again, 11th in the league last season doesn't sound so bad, but the unit completely collapsed down the stretch of last season. So that's another area where Trocheck is going to have to lead, that revitalization. Trocheck is a very, very important player to this Ranger team when it comes to special teams units. I think also in a best case scenario for Vincent Trocheck, how about a 60% success rate on the faceoff circle, as well as Trocheck leading the league in faceoff success rate? The way I look at it is, why not? Those are lofty goals, and those are not easy milestones to hit. But Trocheck has been flirting with 60% basically every season since he's become a Ranger in terms of his faceoff success rate, from least recent to most recent. The 3 seasons that Trocheck has been a Ranger, Trocheck won 56.1% of his faceoffs. Then he won 58.7, and then this past year, 59.3. So he's right there. It's possible, not going to be easy. It's not easy for anybody to pull that off, but it is possible that he could win 60% of his draws this upcoming season. And as far as leading the league in faceoff win percentage on faceoffs, he was 3rd last year. The only 2 players in the league with a higher success rate were Claude Giroux. He was the only one that was over 60%, but you had Claude Giroux and Jean-Gabriel Pageau was just under 60%, but Trocheck was 3rd. And of course, we're not counting guys that took like 10 faceoffs and went like 8 for 10 or anything like that. You have to have a certain amount of faceoffs. But yeah, I mean, he was 3rd in the league. He was right there, one of the elite faceoff men in this league. And you guys know, anybody that's been watching this show for any amount of time, I'm a big proponent of the importance of winning faceoffs, especially when it comes to the playoffs. You just, offensive zone draw, defensive zone draw, you just want to get control of the puck. And I realize not every faceoff win is a clean win. There's going to be some battling for the puck. The puck, sits there and the wingers jump in and try to help and everything. And I get that, but I don't think these numbers happen by accident. I don't think that Vincent Trocheck is accidentally 3 years in a row at 56% or higher while he's been with the New York Rangers. I think there's certainly something to that. And certainly he is an elite faceoff man, and we hope for more of the same this upcoming season. I think also in a best case scenario, Trocheck has the type of season where we all really acknowledge just what a steal he has been for the New York Rangers. Now, the one season where maybe this argument doesn't hold up as well as the other two would be this past season, because again, Vincent Trocheck was one of many, many, many players on the Rangers this past season that just did not meet expectations. And a team is the sum of all of its parts. And when you have an entire roster of guys that are falling short of expectations, you get what you get. And last season, we had the Rangers missing the playoffs just 1 year after winning the President's Trophy. But overall, you look at the entire body of work, the 3 seasons that Trocheck has spent with the New York Rangers since signing his 7-year contract at $5.625 million per season. The guy has been an absolute steal. I don't even really see how that can be argued the other way. And with the cap continuing to rise almost exponentially, from 1 year to the next. And when you look at that, and you also look at some of the contracts that are being given out in free agency, this I guess, ongoing offseason, most of the free agents have signed, but you know what I mean. The guys that have signed this offseason. I mean, you compare Trocheck to some of these guys, and it's highway robbery that you've got this guy for just $5.625 million per season. And the other interesting thing there is, as the contract progresses, as the years progress, the salary cap continues to rise. And that contract in some ways becomes more and more and more of a steal with every passing season, because it's taking up a smaller and smaller percentage of the overall salary cap. That's true of Trocheck or any other player as well. And it's why I don't get as bent out of shape as some people do about, like Igor Shesterkin. Now, look, would I have liked the Rangers to have signed him for a little bit? Yes, sure. Absolutely. Definitely. Yes. But best goalie in hockey, best big game goalie in hockey, when you look at the total body of work since he's been in the league, he deserves to get paid. And as the years go by here, again, that Igor Shesterkin salary cap hit will take up a smaller and smaller percentage of the overall salary cap. A less extreme example would be somebody like Will Borgen. There were defensemen this offseason flying off the board in free agency, setting way bigger contracts than that, who I don't think are even as good as Borgen. And I'm not making Borgen out to be a superstar or anything like that, but $4.1 million a season for Borgen, I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. So, it's a long way of saying that Vincent Trocheck, his current contract, honestly, in some ways, I feel like continues to get better. And if nothing else, when you look at the entire body of work for the first 3 seasons, that's a steal for the New York Rangers. And if he can bounce back in any meaningful way for this upcoming season, we will continue to look at that contract as such. I mean, that's grand larceny by the Rangers, having Vincent Trocheck at that price of just $5.625 million per season. So we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. We're going to have some final thoughts on Vincent Trocheck, just kind of a season outlook, a verdict, if you will. We will get to that in just a second. All right, let's go and wrap up today's episode by talking a little bit more about Vincent Trocheck and what to expect from him, and how this season is going to unfold for Vincent Trocheck. I think we are in a situation here where we need Vincent Trocheck to get back to being one of the best players on this New York Ranger team. You could honestly make the argument this past season that in spite of everything that went wrong for this team, and in spite of Trocheck, like many Rangers, falling short of expectations, that he actually was one of the best players on the team, because he's still an important player to special teams. Obviously, we talked about the face-off dominance. And when you look at his overall points, I mean, yeah, he was one of the more productive players on the Ranger team. But he's got to do better this upcoming season than what we just saw. He's got to go back to being one of those go-to players on the New York Rangers, one of those guys that you put him on the ice with any line mates, you put him on the ice in any situation in the game, and you feel good about it. And I think one of the things that makes Trocheck such an effective player throughout his career, and certainly during most of his time with the New York Rangers, is he is that guy. He's that Swiss Army knife. He's that guy that is useful and is a net positive whenever he's on the ice in any situation, in any game. If you are the New York Rangers and you're down by a goal with 2 minutes to go or 1 minute to go, Vincent Trocheck is one of those guys you're going to want on the ice. The same thing is true if you're up by a goal in that situation. He's one of the guys that you're going to count on, first of all, to win the faceoff. We talked about that a minute ago, but also to grind out the clock and play good defensive hockey and help the Rangers win games. He's somebody that you want out there on the power play. He's somebody that you want out there on the penalty kill. There's a reason why Trocheck has led the Rangers forwards in time on the ice going away in each of the previous 2 seasons. He's somebody that they lean on. He's a go-to guy on the roster, and I think that will continue to be the case. I mentioned earlier that maybe you scale back his ice time just a little bit to prevent some wear and tear, and we'll see how Sullivan looks to go about it. But he is somebody that's tremendously important. He is somebody that the Rangers are going to have to lean on for this upcoming season. I think also, when you're looking at this upcoming season, we talk about the leadership. Whether Vincent Trocheck wears the C or not, he needs to step up as one of the leaders of this team. I think overall we've seen more good examples of Trocheck as a leader in his 3 seasons here than bad examples. Like I said, last season was the anomaly. I think, there just wasn't any leadership from anybody this past season. But, I'm hoping that we actually kind of see it a little bit more than we saw it this past season. Can he kind of go out there and throw his arm around guys like, Offman and Perreault and Berard and any of the other young guys that are coming along? And even really some of the guys that you don't really think of as young guys, even though they still are young guys. I was looking at the Ranger, depth chart today. There will be a bare minimum of 5 Ranger forwards on the roster this upcoming season who were 24 or younger. And that's if all 3 of Berard and Perreault and Offman start the season in the AHL, which I don't think they will. I think you're looking at least 6, maybe 7 guys that fit that description, 24 years old or younger. So I do like having the mix of like veterans like Trocheck and Panarin, and I guess Mika's coming off of a rough season, but I'm giving a clean slate for everybody this upcoming season. So we'll see how that goes. But I do like this idea of having, some veterans who have been there and done that, and guys that have been on deep playoff runs with the Rangers, Vincent Trocheck included, combining them with some young guys and some fresh faces and some guys that can bring some energy and, some upside. So that's all well and good, but the veterans, Trocheck included, need to do their part to lead the way. You can't count on Brandon Offman to be the leader of this team the second that he gets here. The veterans are the guys that have to set the examples and lead the way. And, again, throw their arm around these young players when the occasion calls for it. And Vincent Trocheck is one of the guys that needs to be able to do that. Also, we haven't talked a whole lot about this in today's episode, but the Trocheck-Lafreniere-Panarin line. You guys pretty much know the story. 2 years ago, no exaggeration, one of the absolute best lines in the NHL. Last year, not so much, because nothing about the Rangers was fun or good or exciting last season, right? So even with that being the case, I still want to see those 3 start this upcoming season together, because there's no reason for the fall off that we saw from this trio this past season. It's not like we're talking about guys that are at the very end of their career, that they're all 39 years old and they're slowing down and they just can't get it done anymore. I mean, Panarin is 33, Trocheck is 31, Lafreniere is turning 24 a couple of games into the season, I believe it is. So, I mean, what's the problem? Why did this line take such a massive step back this past season? I'm expecting these guys, and maybe I'm overshooting this or overstating this, I'm expecting these guys to get back to what they were 2 seasons ago, which is one of the best lines in the NHL, because there's nothing preventing it. I mean, Panarin, you look at the season he had 2 years ago, all the points, whatever the final total was, well over 100. I mean, maybe that's unfair to expect that much. But beyond that, I mean, this should still be a line that gets the job done. They seem to complement each other very well. They were ridiculously dangerous off of the rush a few seasons ago. And all 3 of them, they seem to really just feed off of each other. They all had career years. There's no reason why this should be a line that's kind of an afterthought. And really, if the Rangers are going to get back to prominence this upcoming season, if they're going to get back to, let's say, at least the playoffs, then this line is going to have to be leading the way. I think this has to be the most dangerous line that the Rangers have, one of the go-to lines they put on the ice. Because for me, I think your other line, as far as the top 2 lines are concerned, could be, should be, and probably will be Mika Zibanejad with JT Miller. We've talked down here about how we like that combination. Mika did play better when he was with Miller this past season, and Will Cooley will probably be with them. So that leaves you with these 3, and they need to get back to form. They need to figure out a way to do it, and Vincent Trocheck is obviously going to be right in the middle of that. Also, it's easy to forget this because, again, everything was doom and gloom this past season. We all know that. Vincent Trocheck, when he's at his best, we're talking about one of the elite 2-way centers in the NHL. And that's not an exaggeration. We just got through talking about how he's a Swiss Army knife. An expression I've used in the past is that he's basically a B+ at everything. And that's very true. He's one of the guys in this league, certainly on the Rangers, with one of the most well-rounded overall games. Somebody that doesn't really have any weaknesses and somebody that's going to contribute in a lot of different ways. Even this past season, finished 18th in Selke voting. The year before that, he was 16th in Selke voting. So obviously, he's recognized as one of the better defensive forwards. And we know what he can do offensively as well. He can certainly chip in there as well. But like I said, he is one of the elite two-way centers in the NHL when he's at his best. And like we've been talking about, he is one of many, many, many players on this Ranger team that needs to have a bounce back from whatever that was this past season. But hopefully Vincent Trocheck can pull it off. Hopefully his line mates can pull it off as well. Hopefully Trocheck-Lafreniere and Panarin can get back to being that dominant elite line. But fingers crossed, man. Like I said, we've talked about this quite a bit on here. This is the season that I just don't know what to expect from the Rangers. And this is our 7th season doing Locked On New York Rangers. It's the one where I just feel like it goes so many different ways. But if it's going to go well, Vincent Trocheck is one of the guys that needs to bounce back for the upcoming campaign. But we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchik17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.